welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new episode of Africa Today, where we get you the latest news and events taking place on the African scene. And we will start off with our major top stories and reports. Trade exchange between Egypt and African countries grows by 14.4% in 2022, according to data released by Central Agency for Public Mobilization and Statistics. Trade exchange between Egypt and other African countries grew by 14.4% on an annual basis during 2022.
And statistics, the trade exchange between Egypt and African countries grew by 14.4% on an annual basis during 2022. The trade volume between Egypt and African countries reached $8.6 billion in 2022 compared to $7.5 billion in 2021. This growth in trade exchange between Egypt and Africa was supported by an increase in Egyptian exports, which grew by 14% during 2022, reaching $6.3 billion. Libya topped the list of African countries importing from Egypt in 2022, with Egypt's exports to Libya valued at $1.2 billion, followed by Sudan with $929 million, then Morocco with $881 million, Algeria with 741, Kenya 356, Tunisia 307, and Ghana with approximately 238 million. On the other hand, Egypt imports from African countries rose to $2.3 billion during 2022, with an annual growth of 15.4%. The Congo topped the list of African Union countries exporting to Egypt in 2022, with Egypt's imports from the Congo valued at $524 million, followed by Sudan with $504 million, then Zambia with about $314 million, Kenya with about $308 million, and South Africa with $333 million.
Welcome back, and moving on to migrants. Tunisia recovered around 900 migrant bodies to date this year. More details in this report.
The Tunisian Coast Guard reports recovering a total of 901 bodies of drone migrants off its coast so far this year. This makes an unprecedented number of victims of the country's coast, according to the Tunisia's Interior Ministry. Tunisia's Interior Ministry Fekhi said the majority of the 901 bodies were unidentified, with only 36 of them having their identities established as Tunisian nationals and 267 as foreign migrants. The actual number of dead, however, is actually higher, as the statistics only take recovered bodies into consideration. This year's overall death toll on the central Mediterranean route from Tunisia and Libya to Italy, which is considered the world's deadliest migration route, currently stands at 1.769. The real number is assumed to be far higher, with many of the victims never being recovered or reported. Tunisia saw a record number of irregular migrants leaving for Europe from its shores this year, replacing Libya as the main point of departure for migrants and refugees in North Africa. Over 86,000 migrants have succeeded in reaching Italy to date this year, according to the latest figures published by UN Migration Agency. Last year, a total of 105,000 people were registered as having arrived on Italian shores throughout the entire year, putting 2023 on track of breaking that record.
Welcome back, and moving on to South Africa. Health officials are reporting a deadly outbreak of cholera in South African province of Gauteng. More details in this report.
Health officials are reporting a deadly outbreak of cholera in the South African province of Gauteng. Authorities say nearly 50 people have died, with most of the death concentrated in the Hammarskull area. Cases have been reported in other areas as well. Medical officials have urged residents to be vigilant about what they consume and to practice good hygiene like hand washing. Cholera mainly spreads through contaminated water or food. Symptoms include diarrhea, vomiting, and dehydration. Meanwhile, the Provincial Health Department in the South African province of Gauteng announced 19 new cases of cholera including 10 deaths. South Africa reported its first cholera death in February after the virus arrived in the country from Malawi. It was unclear how many cholera cases there was nationally as of Sunday, but the most populous province of Gauteng, where Johannesburg and Pretoria are situated, has been hardest hit. Cholera can cause acute diarrhea, vomiting, and weakness and is mainly spread by contaminated food or water. It can kill within hours if untreated.
Welcome back, dear viewers, and we're delighted to be joined over the phone by Ambassador Souad Chalabi, former assistant to the Foreign Minister. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Well, Ambassador Chalabi, talking more about the African economy and the indicators, according to the African Development Bank, that Egypt was the best economic performer in North Africa region in 2022 with growth rates of 6.6%. How do you see the significance of these economic indicators to Egypt?
Egypt, Nigeria, and South Africa are the biggest economies in Africa, and Egypt has done very well in the figures that you mentioned. So, because of course, with the export rising figures and the possibilities of infiltrating in the markets, African markets with Egyptian goods. So this is something that Egypt is accelerating its investments in Africa, and also in the health sector. There are a lot of projects that Egypt is sponsoring, and especially in the goods and services in the health sector, especially in the vaccines, and also in the supplying of the food elements like crops and fertilizers. And this is something that is raising the economic influence of Egypt in Africa, and also expanding in different regions, like in South Africa, when the president visited several countries in the south, like Angola and Mozambique and Zambia. There has been prospects of investment in these three countries. So not only in the North African region or the East, it's only going also in the South. That accelerates the development between development of investments and trade between Egypt and these countries.
Yes. Well, how far do you think the resumption of international travel had its positive impact on the tourism sector in Egypt?
Of course, it is increasing the flights between Egypt and the different countries in Africa, increases the touristic opportunities, and also raises the standard of our companies, and also the compatibility between other countries in Africa and Egypt, because a lot of Africans want to visit Egypt because of its ancient history, and linking the ancient history of Egypt with, for instance, West Africa and South Africa makes it more easy for tourism to come from Africa, especially if we link it with the safaris in East Africa, and also with safaris in South Africa. So we have regular flights, daily flights going to Johannesburg and going to Nairobi, and these two countries, they have many tourists coming and also transiting in Egypt as a hub for other countries.
Right. Well, President Sisi earlier highlighted the significance of economic integration among the different African states. In your opinion, how far does inter-African and intra-African trade affect the economic status of the different African states?
Of course, being being part of the African Free Trade Area, it makes it easy to export the goods and services, and in the fields of infrastructure, and Egyptian private sector is being encouraged to invest in Africa, especially that there has been a call for the establishment of the investment risk guarantee fund, which will encourage the Egyptian investors and the African investors to come to Egypt. So we are aiming at doubling the volume of intertrade with our African countries in the next 5 years to reach 10 billion from the current 5 billion. So
right. Well, I would
Egypt is the gateway to Africa, and of course it is the meeting of all civilizations. So being a part of the African Continental Free Trade Area brings 1.2 billion people with a GDP of more than 2 trillion.
Right. Well, I would like to thank you very much, Ambassador Shuaid Shalabi, former assistant to the Foreign Minister. Many thanks for your insight. And dear viewers, that brings us to the end of this edition of Africa Today. Many thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more coming up here on Nile TV International.